Hello everybody and welcome to The Mayor and I with me, Lindsay Khan and Nick Buckley, MBE, parliamentary candidate for Oldham East and Saddleworth. And this is a weekly chat we have about current affairs, various things that interest me, Man United, other things as well.
And things that annoy you.
And things that annoy me, irritate me, and that Nick and I may not necessarily agree on, but you get a glimpse into Nick's mind, which is useful. And we're 3 weeks away, Nick, from the... Oh, sorry, welcome, Nick.
Yep. Thank you.
Welcome. We're 3 weeks away from the
General election.
And first of all, before we get into the stuff that we talk about, how's it going?
It's hard. If I have to be honest, it's a bit of a shambles. And that's not just me, that'll be everybody running a campaign. To have a 6-week election that you didn't see coming and no one saw it coming, to start from scratch is hard work for absolutely everybody. It's probably harder for an independent because they don't have the party machine behind them. So it's not a campaign I wish I was running. I thought I'd have 5-6 months, but I only had 6 weeks. But we are where we are, and the only consolation is everybody else is in my situation as well.
Yeah, and I think that was Rishi Sunak's plan, wasn't it? To wrong foot everybody, because I think we were kind of being fed the propaganda it was going to be a November election. So I think everybody's settled into that mindset, and I think he did that. But I think it's spectacularly backfired on him as well, because Farage has entered the fray with reform, which has impacted on you as well. I understand there's now a reform candidate in Oldham East, and there potentially wasn't going to be one before. And there is some concern that will take votes away from you in Oldham East. But also Farage, in entering the fray, has wounded the Tories as well, because he's definitely going to take votes away from the Tories, which he wants to do. I get
that's his aim. But I think if Farage would have had 6 months, I think it'd have damaged the Tories even more.
Yeah.
So I think Sunak was right to call this snap early election.
Yeah.
Sunak knows they're going to lose.
Yeah.
They're just trying to mitigate how bad the loss is.
Yeah.
So Tories are thinking, we're going to run an awful campaign anyway because everyone hates us.
Yeah.
Well, let's make sure everybody else runs a terrible campaign as well.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah. So I think we're going to talk about the election later, but the two things have happened, I think, that have impacted Sunak. First, Farage has entered the fray, which I think has again sideswiped the Tories. And also this kind of really terrible cock-up on the D-Day thing.
Oh.
So I don't know.
You couldn't make that up, could you?
Yeah.
Who are his advisors?
Yes. Yeah.
Who signed this off?
Yeah.
Who said this would be okay? But when you have a dying government, mistakes come after mistakes, comes after mistakes. I
think it gives us a real insight into this government and how it's been run, and it's clearly a shambles. You almost get the impression they're like a bunch of sixth formers making decisions, in a lunchtime over serious matters, almost naive and childlike. And I remember when the last Tory government left. I don't know if you remember Ken Clarke leaving, and you're probably too young to remember. Ken Clarke had to kind of carry his own furniture out, and you just suddenly saw these are very kind of, poorly managed, poorly run people with no apparatus behind them, no substance. Yeah. It's just, and I think the Tories now are in that position. They're just crumbling, aren't they?
Well, that's a good point, because you're talking about the major end of the major premiership. And that collapsed because he came out with a fantastic policy called Back to Basics.
Yes.
Meaning back to family values, back to morality. And within weeks of him coming out with that, the press came out with all the MPs sleeping with each other, taking backhanders, being closet homosexuals. And it's like, well, that's what happens at a dying government, is you come out with policies that you've not thought about, and you just keep making mistakes because you're dying. Yeah. You're grasping at straws. Yeah. And that straw might save me. It might make it worse. Well, I'm losing anyway. Grasp at it anyway.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that with some of these crazy ideas they're coming out with now. And all Starmer has to do is just keep his mouth shut. That's all he needs to do.
Yeah.
Which he's not doing very well, but he needs to do that. We'll come back onto that, but there's quite a few stories. There's lots of news at the moment.
Yeah.
There's just loads of news. One thing that I like to talk about, and I know you don't, is COVID.
Yeah.
My impression, we'll talk about this later again because of something that was in the Financial Times this week that fascinated me. But the mainstream media this week finally acknowledged that COVID vaccines cause harm. And there was an article in the Telegraph on the 4th of June, headed up, COVID vaccines may have helped fuel rise in excess deaths. And for our listeners, what a lot of people are not aware of, that one of the measures of whether there's issues in societies is what's called excess deaths. So they basically chart numbers of deaths. They work that against demographics, and they work out what the number of deaths there should be in a society or a country in every year. And anything above that they call excess deaths. So if you look at the years before COVID, excess deaths were relatively small. In fact, almost non-existent. They were because the population was under control. Then obviously COVID happened, excess deaths rocketed. Then after COVID, of course, there's an expectation that excess deaths would remain relatively low, go back to being low again. In fact, in theory, it should be even lower because quite a swathe of the elderly population were wiped out by COVID. The week there was a culling, wasn't there? So you would expect excess deaths to drop, but in fact, they've risen quite dramatically. And this information, by the way, is not really parlayed to the public, to our gentle listeners. It's not in the headlines. It should be in the headlines because the numbers are quite dramatic. Tens of thousands of excess deaths per year in this country alone. But what's really interesting is now that the mainstream media are starting to identify this and comment on it and linking it to COVID and COVID vaccines. So I just wondered what your observation on. I know you're kind of bored with COVID. You don't like talking about it, but
the excess deaths. First of all, we need to work out which deaths have been caused by the vaccines and which deaths have been caused by people not being able to get treatment throughout the COVID era. And a cancer would have got caught 4 years ago, would have been dealt with early. We didn't find it for 3 years later. I'm sorry, sir, now you're going to die in 6 months. So a lot of that would have happened.
Correct.
It was obvious from day one that every vaccine, every medical intervention has downsides. It may overall be a good thing and save more lives than it destroys. So it should come to no surprise to anybody that COVID vaccines will do some damage to some people and potentially kill some people because all drugs do that. I've not seen the studies. I'm not sure how they talk about that. But it was obvious that COVID vaccines and the facts that were rushed through so quickly. What's it, normally 10 years to get a drug on the market?
I think it's 8 years.
8 years to get a drug on the market, and we did it in 6 months.
Yes.
It's like, I mean, just that's enough to make you open your eyes and go, wow.
Yeah.
I think the reason why the press now are beginning to report it is because the first few years they were complicit in this. They knew they were. And as time goes on, new reporters come through, or they start forgetting that they were involved in it, and they start looking at things again.
Yeah, and I think it's happening. And the excess deaths we're talking about, yes, you're right. Some are directly as a result of lockdown, waiting lists, but there are some that are specifically related to the vaccine. A particular thing that is now very well publicised is clotting in relatively young people. Blood clots that cause as a result of and cardiac arrhythmias as a result. There's been quite a lot of that happening. People dying, having strokes or whatever. So it's a lot of these excess deaths are directly now related to the vaccine. Right. And it's getting harder and harder to deny. But
am I right in thinking that the pharmaceutical companies did a deal with all the governments saying we will give you this vaccine and sell you this vaccine, but because we've not done clinical trials, we can never be. You take the blame for this. We cannot be sued ourselves.
Yeah. That is correct, but what's interesting is they are being sued, and they've. I think Pfizer have withdrawn one of the vaccines already.
Yeah.
I think it's Pfizer, or it may be one of the other drug companies, And but also there are class actions now starting because of vaccine harms against them. So I'm not quite sure how that's working, because I think you're right. The government did do some sorts of amnesty deal with them, but for some reason there are people that are actually taking actions against the drug companies. So something is happening, and you know it's knocking money off the share. So that's one that I wanted to raise. It's quite interesting. Moving over the Atlantic, Trump. And I think last week we discussed his trial result, didn't we? Yeah. It's, again, a small article I saw.
And have you seen the paper an hour ago? Biden's son has been found guilty of all the charges and faces up to 25 years in jail.
I saw that, yeah.
His gun charges and stuff like that.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Who knows? In America, who knows? But he's been found guilty.
Yeah.
And he can do up to 25 years in jail.
He deserves to be in jail. So, it's a very small article, but Trump is having a fundraiser in California. So California, as we know, is a very woke left wing, but on both the American coastlines. That's where the majority of the woke population and the high density population and the Democrats are. But there's a Trump fundraiser set in California, and the tickets to sit at the table with Trump cost you $500,000, which sounds crazy, doesn't it? So it'll be an evening with Trump. You know, he'll be doing a speech and he'll be sitting at the table. And if you pay $500,000, you can sit at the table. And all the tickets are expensive. Yeah. I think the cheapest is $100,000 or something. Sold out. Yeah. Sold out in California.
I tried to do something very similar for my Oldham campaign.
Yes.
And I couldn't even fill a table at McDonald's.
It was a £20 price tag that put people off, Nick, on that one. But that's kind of interesting. And, of course, California is full of these tech giants, these tech billionaires who classically are woke. If you look at the guy who set up Twitter, I can't remember his name now, but he's like a hippie, and the classically, apart from Musk, most of them are very left wing. Yeah. But I think what this signifies for me is they are woke, they are, they have particular views, but they're not stupid, are they?
Well, we don't know who's bought the tickets. Because
it's people who've gone $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, California is a woke state and a very progressive state, but that doesn't mean everyone who lives there is. It just means the vast majority of people are.
Yeah.
So there'll still be people there who are Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So I don't think many of the billionaires will be changing their mind, because to a certain extent they're insulated. They're going to be billionaires anyway.
Yeah.
And those sort of people don't usually go cap in hand to politicians. It's the other way round.
Do you think so?
Yeah, they wait for politicians to come cap in hand to them. But there will be people, very rich people in California who like Trump, who have seen the destruction of their state.
Yeah.
Crime out of control, homelessness out of control. There's something, I wrote an article about this about 3 years ago. There's something like 60,000 people sleeping on the streets in California. 60,000.
Was that 3 years ago?
Yeah.
What is it?
When I wrote the article, probably even more than that. But that, there was a couple of million people who were homeless, who were working hold-down jobs, don't have mental health issues, don't have drug issues, but are living in their cars because they can't afford to live anywhere. But they're fully working full-time.
Wow.
But they live in their car. That's a big thing in California. So there's people living in California who are seeing the destruction of their state and welcome someone like Trump.
Yeah. I think California now has net migration, doesn't it? More people are leaving California than are entering California, because it is just such a horrible place to be at the moment.
And even though it's got net migration, if you looked at the figures, it's only a net migration. It's not a net migration catastrophe because of the illegals pouring in. If the illegals weren't pouring in, California would be emptied over the next 10 years.
Oh, really?
It's only the fact that so many immigrants are
So even though there's net migration, it's far less than it would be because there's so many illegals coming in there as well. Yeah. So I think it's interesting, isn't it? He's gone to California. He's going to this thing. It's sold out.
Yeah.
He's going to be raising a lot of money in California as well.
Yeah.
And you just get the impression now, just looking at articles, that he's just going to absolutely kill this presidential election.
You would think so. I can't believe they've got Biden running. I really thought They could never tell you a year ago Biden's not running, because once you do that, no one listens to the president anymore now. You're a lame duck. You're not going to be there. I understand them saying he's running, but I can't believe they're letting him run.
Yeah.
I said it before, it's elder abuse. It really is, it's elder abuse. And surely they know they can't win with him. He won't be able to do the debates. He's going to make a fool of himself.
Yeah.
And is that really the best they've got?
Well, that's interesting, because what I've also heard is they've scheduled a debate, haven't they, with Biden and Trump. Have you heard about this?
I knew one was
I think it's in July.
Yeah, and Trump wants him to do a drugs test or something.
Yeah, but apparently it takes place before the nomination of the Republican candidate, of the Democratic candidate.
Right.
So one thing I've heard, and I don't know where I heard
it might be a quick switcheroo after.
Yeah, they may use the debate as a reason, and I don't know if you've seen it on. I don't know how much you watch American programs or clips, but there is a lot of the American the late night guys, they are horrific Republicans. Yeah. They're just awful, obscene in the way they fawn over
Democrats.
Democrats. Yeah. Sorry, apologies. Democrats. And it's Stephen Colbert is one, and all those guys, they are horrific Democrats, very woke.
They sit there going, Trump's bad, and everyone cheers and claps and laughs. That wasn't a joke.
I know, it's just horrible. They say horrific things about the Republicans, about Trump, and you're right, people laugh, and it's just not funny. Yeah. But I noticed Stephen Colbert, I think it was, referenced, because there's an article in the New York Post or the New York, I can't remember which one it is, but it's a Democratic paper saying that Biden's getting old, and he was talking about the fact that Biden, and I thought this is very unusual for them to be talking about his age. Suddenly everybody's talking about the fact on the Democratic side, and I think they're leading into, again, they foreshadow these things, don't they? I think they're leading into that debate. I think Biden's going to be humiliated, and I think they're going to say, oh, as a result of this, we've decided we're going to have another nominee to
possibly. I don't think it'd be for those reasons.
Yeah.
I think it'll be more like a Rishi Sunak decision. This will put them all off guard.
Yeah.
Everyone is campaigning now, thinking it's against Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And at the last minute, it's not Joe Biden, it's someone else. Trump will have less time then to destroy him, to insult him.
Yeah.
So it could be trying to put him on.
And who do you think that might be?
I've not got an idea.
Yeah.
Not got an idea. I don't know that much about American politics.
Yeah.
But there's no one waiting in the wings that we've heard of.
Michelle Obama, or Mike as they call him.
No, I don't think. I don't. They do this all the time. They always talk about someone famous. We mentioned Oprah Winfrey before being president, and Michelle Obama, but these people have got no political experience. I can never see them coming forward for that. But if they think they're going to lose, and there is no one else, and Trump's a machine, maybe they'll do something different. They'll try anything if they think they're going to lose.
Yeah. Coming back over the Atlantic to the British Trump, Nigel Farage. Yep. I don't know if that's fair calling him the British Trump. He's a bit more sophisticated, isn't he? Or is he? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a fair comparison, but I think he's a disruptor. So because he's a disruptor, you'd put him in the same sort of camp. But politically and policy-wise, they're very different.
So there's something I want to talk about here, which I think is... I've been thinking a lot about it. So I don't want to give names here or even too much detail, because this is somebody I know well and know well to my family. But there was a conversation between somebody, it wasn't necessarily me.
Yeah. Between X and Y.
And Y was a lawyer friend. And in this conversation, they were talking about politics, these people, unnamed people who were close to me, were talking about politics. And Nigel Farage was mentioned, and this lawyer said, "I'll not be voting Farage because he's an extremist." So the person who we know, who was on the other side of the table, said, "What do you mean by that? Can you give me an example?"
That's what I would have asked.
Can you give me an example of his extremism? And and he couldn't, of course, and he said it's more of a gut feel. Now, so this is a lawyer in his 70s, by the way.
Yeah,
this is
I would also say pro EU.
Pro EU.
Yeah. This lawyer.
But yeah, it's probably pro. You mean against Brexit? You mean? Yeah.
So you'd never forgive. Nigel Farage.
But that's fine. But you won't call him an extremist, Farage, because of that. So he said. So he couldn't give an example, of course, and he said it's a gut feel. Now this is a lawyer, retired lawyer in his 70s. Yeah. Very, very clever, highly intelligent.
Yeah. Should be very good at critical thinking.
Very good at critical thinking. And saying this, and then it put me in mind of a phrase that Socrates made before. So Socrates was put to death. He wasn't put to death. He was forced to eat hemlock or something. Right. Because his views were upsetting the council of the Greek council, basically. So, but one of Socrates' phrases, and he said it as he was about to die, was, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And this is what I thought when I heard this comment from this lawyer. This is a man, an intelligent man, who is not examining his life and his thought processes. But to a massive extent here, to make a statement like that gives you an insight into this guy's mind, and gives you an insight into the mind of a lot of people. They are not examining. People do not examine their thoughts, their lives, their statements a lot of the time, do they? They say things like this.
Yeah. And the reason why he said that is because in his social circle, they all say that.
Yeah.
We do not examine and pull apart all our thoughts and opinions all the time. We only would do that when we're challenged. He said that because he's never been challenged. His friends say the same thing, think the same thing, and because of that, it becomes the truth. So, to him and his friends, Farage is an extremist, but he's never been in a position where anyone's challenged him. I'd like to think he went home that night and thought about, well, I couldn't give one example. If I had someone in the dock who said that to me and couldn't give me an example of something, I'd rip him apart. So let's hope he went home thinking about it. Why couldn't I give not 15 examples, why couldn't I give one example of why I think he's an extremist?
Yeah.
So let's hope he thought about it.
And part of the answer to this is to get people examining their thoughts, isn't it? So on last Thursday, there was Comedy Unleashed in Manchester, which you didn't go to. I did ask if you were going, but you didn't go.
Did you go?
I went, yeah.
I believe it was very good.
It was excellent. Apparently there was a transvestite outside trying to cause trouble. Apparently. But it is a step forward that these things are happening now in main venues, and there aren't crowds.
And they didn't get cancelled.
And it didn't get cancelled, yeah. So, because I think the mood is shifting now, and the mainstream politicians are now saying, yes, women can't have penises and all that sort of stuff. So I think so it was a very, very good evening. But Rob was there, Rob the American. Yeah. Barry Wall was there as well. And I was just thinking, you three, you, Barry and Rob, whenever we're talking, if I make a statement to one of you, if I said something like Trump is an extremist, I just wouldn't get away with that, would I?
No.
With any of the three of you, because all three of you would go, what do you mean by that? Can you explain that or whatever?
Give an example.
And, exactly. And any conversation with you three, I'm very measured in what I say, because I know if I say something flippant, glib or whatever, you'll potentially tear it.
You're going to have to back it up.
Yeah, I'm going to have to back it up. And that's why I like spending time with you, with Rob, with Barry, going to those things, because the people there, without wishing to big them up too much, they do examine their lives and they do examine their thoughts and their process. There's no way Barry Wall, you can say anything to Barry Wall that isn't fully thought out before you say it, because he will just tear you apart if you're saying something that doesn't make sense or is stupid or what. Even when you say something that makes sense, he tears you apart. So it's kind of, that.
And the three of us, four including you, we all have different views as well.
Yes, yeah, totally.
So it's not like we're all on the same page and you say something, we all gang up on you.
Yeah.
We all have different views on many topics. But we tolerate each other because we're friends.
Yes, yeah.
And we try to learn off each other because we've all got different experience and different information. But we will not give each other a pass by coming out with something glib, something not thought out, something that's just hyperbolic. It's like, oh, no. You need to back that up.
Yeah. And I think that is fabulous, and I think that's the journey, isn't it? I think you've always been there. You've been there a long time. The journey for me has happened in the past 4 or 5 years, where I am examining my thoughts all the time about anything, and it is getting me in trouble and causing me problems, and lots of meetings I go to, people say things, and then the whole thing just kicks off because of that. But it's such a better life to lead, isn't it? I think such a better way to lead your life. But how do we teach? I know this is what Barry does, isn't it? He's got his warrior teacher thing or whatever. How do we get people to start examining their thought processes?
First of all, most people won't and never will. What we need is a certain percentage of the population who are the leaders in industry, leaders in education, people in important roles. They're the ones we need to teach how to think critically and examine their belief systems and why they believe and do certain things. Because most people are sheep, and that's not being insulting to them. Most people haven't got the time, the energy, the inclination to worry about anything. They're too busy working, paying the bills, wanting to go on holiday with the children, and we're going to leave other decisions to other people to make. And that's because we're a tribal creature. So most people will follow the tribal leader. But in our society now, we have many tribal leaders. They're the ones we need. And we would have said 30, 40 years ago, well, that's a job of university, isn't it? But university is now the problem. University now is the propaganda camp.
Yeah.
So how do we turn this around? I think things are already turning around on this. And I think the answer is basically self-education, which is easier now than it's ever been. As in, we've got the world's knowledge in our phone, in our pocket.
Yeah.
YouTube, all these apps now have lots of information and videos. You might not agree with all of them. When I'm watching YouTube sometimes, my wife will say, what is this crap about? And I'll say, I've no idea. But the title, I knew I didn't know anything about it. So I'm watching this to find out if I need to know anything about this. Because how do I know I don't need to know any of that until I've watched it?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it is, she's right, it's a load of crap.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't know that until I've watched it.
Sometimes even if it's just a moment where you see something that gives you an insight into something else, it's important. There were two examples, just reflecting on this unexamined life, there were two examples that I think are quite interesting that I saw following this. One was a survey of people, young people, and in that survey, 54%, and again, this is an example of an unexamined thought process. 54% of the 18 to 24-year-olds who were surveyed in this poll agreed with the statement, the state of Israel should not exist. So that's 54%. It's not 10% or 20%. So that means the majority of people between 18 and 24 believe the state of Israel should not exist. Yeah. I mean, do you think that's quite a horrific statistic? And is that what you believed, the way people are thinking? Is that what you believe people are thinking out there at the moment? Young people are thinking?
No. And I don't think... when you do these surveys, it depends who you ask, where you ask them, so we don't know. But let's take that figure as correct. Our education system is so poor in this country, most young people couldn't find Israel on the map.
Yeah.
Most young people have got no idea about Israel, wouldn't know the history of Israel, wouldn't know why it was set up, how it was set up. And I'm not saying I'm a supporter of Israel. I don't care one way or the other. It's not my concern. But I do know the history founding of Israel, and I've been to Israel. But our young people now know nothing. They don't know anything. All they know is which side you need to be on to be a good person. And Israel now is perceived as the oppressor, and the Palestinians are perceived as the oppressed. And as a young person, well, I'm on the side of the oppressed. It makes me a good person. A lot of young people now got no idea about Nazi Germany and what the Jews went through. I'd say 100% of young people have got no idea before Nazi Germany what the Jews went through in Russia and across Europe, being expelled. I mean, young people don't even know why we have Jews in Europe, because we were expelled out of the Middle East. So our education system is to blame for a lot of this stuff.
But to me, the Jewish, the Holocaust, 6 million Jews killed in the Second World War. To me, it's not. I've got to be careful what I'm saying here. It's not. I'm saying it's academic. It's academic in terms of what's happening now.
It's also perceived now as ancient history.
Yeah, but what I can't get on this is, can't people see how they are treating Jewish people in this country, in the world, with these behaviours? That they, again, the unexamined life. We are now starting to say, if you're from Israel, you can't be a member of this. You can't go in the Eurovision Song Contest. That young woman in the Eurovision Song Contest was pilloried, attacked, abused, but people can't see that bullying, that approach to the Israelis, to the Jewish people,
because they're bad people.
Yeah.
And we're always taught to be bad, to be unkind.
It's okay.
To bad people.
It's okay to be unkind, to be unfair, to bully, to harangue, to harass
bad people. Yeah.
But that is the dislocation for me, because it's so visible, isn't it? This oppression now of Jewish people, not Israelis, Jewish people.
And again, that's because our education system is so poor. There's no difference between an Israeli and a Jewish person. They have no concept that Israel's a country, and in that country 25% of all citizens are actually Muslim. But a Jewish person isn't an Israeli citizen, they're a citizen of the country they live in. So in this country, every Jew I meet here, and I've got some Jewish friends, are British citizens. They support Israel, but they're not Israelis. So we're now...
Quite a few Jewish people in the UK don't support
Israel. Yeah. So some of them do.
Yeah.
It actually is racist.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're saying because you're of that religion, then we're going to treat you poorly because of what that country's doing, and the majority of those people are like you. Well, I don't live in that country.
Yeah.
It's not my country. This is my country.
Yeah.
It's growing up, and you read about Nazi Germany, and you see, Schindler's List, and you think to yourself, how the hell did that happen? You could understand it in Rwanda to a certain extent, different continents, and we'd say the savages, but we do that to make ourselves feel better, that they're not like us.
But they are.
But they are like us. And you look at Germany, who are our cousins, and you think, how did Nazi Germany happen? And for most of my life, I thought to myself, I have no idea how it happened, but it could never happen again. And this last year, I'm looking around going, this is how it happens.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, it's going to happen again.
I think, for me, the realisation that it could happen didn't happen in this last year. This last year has been an extension of that. For me, COVID was when it happened for me, when I thought, flipping heck, this really can happen. The lockdowns, the neighbours tittle-tattling, the oppression of people who wouldn't take the vaccine, the marginalisation, the actual hatred against people who wouldn't wear a mask or wouldn't have the vaccine. And you saw that tribal behaviour coming out.
But that was directed at everybody.
Yeah.
A group wasn't picked out for that authoritarianism.
It wasn't picked out, but they complied.
Yeah.
The people were told, even though the data was totally clear that this was not a deadly disease or whatever, they were told, you have to behave this way. Yeah. If you don't behave this way, if you don't have the vaccine, you're a bad person.
You're going to kill Granny.
Yeah, you're going to kill Granny. And people who didn't have the vaccine or whatever were treated in the same way that a Jewish person would be treated in the Weimar Republic before. And when that happened for me, that opened my eyes, and I thought, flipping it, this can happen.
Oh yeah.
A government can direct a people to behave in a certain way against all logic and rationale, and they did that, didn't they? You know, the way people were treated. They're still convicting people for COVID crimes now as we speak. So what's happened now with the way that the Jews are being treated in Europe and in the UK is not surprising. It's not surprising me. What keeps surprising me is the fact that people cannot see what they're doing. That's what surprises me. They just cannot see the oppression, the bullying, the hatred they're exhibiting in these situations.
They don't want to see it. They want to be on the side of righteousness.
Yeah.
And Jews are killing Palestinians, so therefore Jews must be bad.
Yeah.
And it's a way for these individuals to validate their own life and their own morality by saying to themselves, yeah, I'm actually not a very nice person, and deep down inside I know I'm not a very nice person, and I failed here and I failed there, but if I join this bandwagon,
I become a good person.
So I'm going to join that bandwagon.
Yeah. And the unexamined life again. So there's a presenter in America, a drag queen. And normally our views on drag queens are, you know,
I've actually saw this clip.
Oh, did you see this clip? Yeah.
Last week I saw it, yeah.
So she's called he is called, I've got to be careful here. He is called Lady Maga. But he's a man who dresses as a woman, a drag queen, which is quite clever. Lady Maga.
Yeah.
It's a play on Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
Who's a pop star, isn't it? You may not have heard of her.
Yeah, I've heard of Lady Gaga. And Maga, as in, so he's actually must be a Trump supporter.
Yes, which is so it's quite a clever play on words. But of course, because he's a drag queen, he gets access to the progressives, to the people. Because of course, when a drag queen comes. You're welcome. You're one of us now. You know, we hate J.K. Rowling and all that sort of stuff. So he went over to interview pro-Palestinian, and said, "Are you pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel?"
Well.
And she went, "Pro-Palestinian, of course." Yeah, of course, pro-Palestinian. Because of course, talking to a drag queen, we're friends. It's like you know, Trump. It's like Farage is an extremist. And so he said, and you've seen the clip. So he said, "Do you know that in Palestine, I would be imprisoned or killed by the Palestinians?" And he said, because they don't tolerate gay people like me. And the reaction from this was just unbelievable. She stopped, she was smiling and laughing, and she went, "Really?" And then you could see her trying to reconcile in her own mind, "Oh, that gives me something to think about." Yeah. And then she said, "But the Israelis are the same." And he said, no, the Israelis are...
they have Pride weekends.
Yeah, the Israelis are they're pro-Pride, they're open, they have gay marriage and all that sort of stuff. Oh, really? And then she said, but of course he said any Islamic country, like Palestine, do not tolerate homosexuality. They'll imprison, throw them off buildings. They do that in Iran, don't they? Throw them off buildings or whatever. And so I wouldn't be able to what do you think about that? And they said, "Oh, yeah, but, you know," she said, "Israel's an Islamic country." She said, by the way, she's prefaced this by saying she studied Middle Eastern. And he said, no, Israel is a Jewish state. It's not Islamic. And it was somebody who was protesting, a pro-Palestinian protester. But the level of ignorance of that person...
On every level.
Was unbelievable. And again, another example of an unexamined life. Somebody who is following sheepishly, slavishly, behaviours, ideas against an entire country and people who has no idea at all.
And an indictment on the education system.
But if you're that uneducated, why actually go anywhere near these things?
Because you don't realise you're uneducated.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a saying once that within 3 minutes of being in a room, if you've not worked out who the idiot is, it's you.
I must be the idiot. Well, I thought that was really, really good. And
she was being very genuine. She
Yeah.
wasn't abusive. She was trying to learn, and she was shocked. So they throw people off roofs, and you can't. She knew nothing about anything.
Yes, yeah.
But yet she wanted to be a good person and protest Israel.
Yeah.
It was great TV.
It was great TV.
But she would imagine now is the butt of every joke of anyone who meets
you. Yeah. I just thought it was staggering, that just staggering, and as I say, just going back to my thought here, if we could just get people to start examining their thoughts and their processes in some way, if we start to do that, it would make such a massive difference. But I think you're right. I don't think it will happen.
No, we help people like her by destroying the ideology she thinks is correct. That's how we help her.
Yeah.
So if we can destroy this woke ideology, she then won't find a new. Well, she'll just follow what comes after it, and hopefully it'll be something more sensible because we've destroyed this silliness.
Yeah. If the ideologies are in the right place and are examined, then if they follow those, then that's fine, isn't it? I suppose. Speaking about woke ideologies, you and I discussed this before we started today, working from home, which I despise, and in our businesses we don't let people work from home.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure that a few do, but I'm not being told about it.
Yeah.
But I was thrilled. Manchester United, I think is my team. Jim Ratcliffe, who's taken over, who heads up Ineos, is the richest man in Britain.
Yeah.
He's given staff at Manchester United a week to return to the office or leave the business, because he's found out within a short time culturally there it's a mess. United, they're all working from home, nobody's focused, the culture in the business is poor. So he's taken the first step by telling people to come back to work. What's your thoughts about that?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I know lots of people who work from home, especially during COVID, and they thoroughly loved it. I had a friend who is a computer designer, coder, and he was 5 days a week in office till COVID, and then he spent a year and a half working from home. Loved it. He would get out of bed at 2 minutes to 9, turn on his computer so head office could see he's logged on. He'd then have a shower and breakfast. He'd watch a bit of TV. He'd do a bit of work. He'd take the dogs for a walk and have lunch. He'd come back, do a bit more work, wash the pots, do his washing, leave the computer turned on and do a bit more work about 5 o'clock and turn it off. And he did that for a year and a half. And I said to him, do your bosses really? He went, no one knows what we do. No one can judge how much work we're doing. He was, this is great. That's one example. I know people who work from home from the council. Anybody who works for us, meaning the taxpayer.
Yeah.
When you phone HMRC, you can't get through. They're all working from home.
Yeah.
We have unions now in our country who are lobbying the Labour government, the late Labour, because they're going to be in government soon, to change legislation, not only to make working from home a legal right, but working from home from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. Because at the moment, if you work for HMRC, all these places, there's, I don't know how many, but it's in the thousands of people are working from Nigeria, Pakistan, India, on British wages, and just went home, and are still working from home there now.
Oh, you mean they originally were from there?
Yeah.
Oh,
I've
I
got
see.
family there, but you can live there a lot, 30 grand as a council job here, you move to Nigeria
Live like a king.
and go in with your dad, then you're living like a king there. So all this needs to stop. We need to get people back into the office for several reasons. The first reason is it's good for you. It's good for your mental health. We're social creatures. We need to be around people.
Yeah.
We need to interact. It's only when I'm sat next to you that I hear you talking about a problem that I can chip in and go, I've dealt with that.
Yeah.
You need to do this. Or someone else can ask, I've never seen this before. And then someone in the office goes, oh, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a younger member of staff. How do you learn the trade? How do you learn what goes on if no one older than is teaching you and having you under their wing because you're all working from home? So mental health is becoming worse for those people. The myth that productivity doesn't change if you're working from home is a huge fat lie.
I agree.
Because we all know this to be true. The answering phone calls now in councils and HMRC and licensing have all collapsed because you can't get anyone to answer anything.
Correct.
The wait now to get a reply by email is weeks and weeks and months and months. And it's all because people are working from home and doing a lot less at home than they are. A private business who wants to run their business like that That's not my concern. You run your business how you want to run your business.
Yeah.
And if that affects your bottom line and you go bankrupt, that's down to you.
Yeah.
Or if you save so much money from office space that you're happy with that, well, that's good for you as well.
Yeah.
Private businesses can do what they want. But state-funded services are not private businesses. They're my business.
Yeah.
And I want value for money. So
Yeah.
we need to get people back into the office. That also helps town centres and city centres.
Yes, it does.
Helps the transport network because they're getting no money coming in. Shops selling sandwiches, which then have to employ more people. This is how we keep the economy
Correct.
going.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're letting many civil servants get the benefits of working from home without giving those benefits back to other people in their jobs.
Yeah.
It's a me situation. So
Yeah.
I'm very against working from home.
Yeah.
Even though I work from home.
Yeah, but your home is your work at the moment.
That is my
Because
office.
you have to work from home. But I think it's... I agree. I think and again, working from home is another awful result of COVID
Yep.
and lockdowns. The direct result of that. And efficiency, productivity in this country has dropped, and we're not making these numbers up. The productivity in this country has dropped definitely as a result of this happening.
And we've always had a problem with productivity in this country.
Exactly, yeah. So I think, I totally agree with Jim Ratcliffe telling everybody to come back to work, and people do definitely work harder in the office. I think what you described there about that friend of yours who switched, I think that's happening a lot.
Yeah.
And it is worse in the public sector. There's no doubt about it, because there's nobody. The trouble with the public sector, because it's not a private business, there's nobody who has ownership or concern or worries about productivity or whatever, because there's nobody to judge them or whatever. It's, I've had dealings with the public sector recently where the number of times I'll ring up and somebody is off sick, the same person, they're off sick, then they're on holiday, there's an out-of-office email, and they never appear to be in the office at all, these people. So it's...
Well, the stats on sickness in the UK is an employee takes twice as much sick leave in the public sector than they do the private sector. Twice as much.
Yeah, because nobody comments on it.
Nothing you can do. Very hard to sack someone in the public sector.
Yeah.
And your boss doesn't want to take that fight on because no one else cares.
Yeah. Why does he need to take the fight?
So why am I going to fight you with your sickness? Because none of my bosses care.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm now causing an issue for them because you're going to put a grievance in. You're going to get unions involved. So all everybody wants is a quiet life. So the culture just carries on.
This is horrific. I'm not sure what the answer is.
I work with people in the council. Here's some true stories. I've worked with several people in the council who run private businesses on council time. One guy was a DJ at weekends. All he did sat next to me was answer his phone about bookings and stuff like that. I know someone else who was a landlord, had 3-4 properties. He spent all his time sat in the office sorting out maintenance, sorting out new renters. And this goes on all the time. I knew somebody else who, anytime they needed flyers for their weekend business, would use all the council printers. This goes on all the time.
So if you were elected to Parliament and then over the course of the next couple of years became the Prime Minister, which could happen, how would you fix that? If you were responsible, it's an interesting question, isn't it? If you were responsible for the public's, and you are standing for public office, so you're prepared.
If I win, I'm going to be doing it in Oldham.
If you win, you're going to do it. So how, if you win in Oldham, how will you make sure the people who work for the public sector or the council in Oldham, I don't know what your powers would be, but how could you fix that? Because that's a big problem to fix.
It is. We start, and the only power I've got is press attention. So I would start by highlighting the problems to the press and to the public, and that's how we start. We need to get the average guy in the street angry about how much waste and incompetence there is in the public sector. So when I'm saying to people, I'm going to get people who work in the public sector in Oldham to whistleblow to me. So in the NHS, probation, the council, and say.
And that would be things like, there's a bloke who sits next to me who's on the phone all day for his...
Yeah, and also we've just spent 50 grand on pencils, and now we've got enough pencils in Oldham Council now for 9 years.
Yeah.
Well, who ordered them? I want to hold people accountable, but I don't have direct influence over those organisations, but I can raise those issues, A, in Parliament, B, to the Chief Exec, and demand answers, and I'll get answers because I'm an MP, but my secret power is just highlighting it all and embarrass people.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know if you watched the political debate. I think there were 5 or 6 parties there.
Yeah. I didn't watch it.
When they were talking about I don't blame you.
Yeah.
When they were talking about the NA, I am strangely being drawn to these programs because I am genuinely interested in the political dynamics here. But they were asked about the NHS, and everybody except Farage said you need to the government hasn't put enough money in. Now Farage said the NHS is broken.
NHS is broken, and
we need a new model.
Yeah.
And we'll come to the audience in a minute, but that didn't go down well. But I thought, yeah, you're spot on here. You know, you're spot on. This waste. This isn't about more money. This is about this place running efficiently. Basically.
If the NHS was a good model, why has no other country ever copied it and repeated it?
Yeah.
No country's ever done it.
No.
Because it was good when it was better than nothing when it started 100 years ago. It was like, oh, this is good. Within several years of it starting, the reports say they already knew it was going out of hand. Within several years, they stopped dental treatment because it's like, we can't afford any of this. It just started ballooning almost from day one because there's always something new coming along that you can spend money on for treatments and for drugs and stuff like that. The whole thing is run appallingly. Half my family work for the NHS. They tell me stories all the time. But we're at a stage at the moment, a bit like we were 5 years ago, where you daren't criticise any immigrants because you'd be a racist, but we've got over that now.
Yeah.
And NHS, the criticism of NHS started a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We're slowly getting there. The NHS is not fit for purpose. The NHS is not affordable. The NHS doesn't work.
Yeah.
But no mainstream politician wants to say that because they perceive it to be a vote loser. And it might be a vote loser. But what we're waiting for, the whole thing to collapse because it's getting close to collapsing.
Yeah.
It doesn't produce anything we want. You can't get doctor's appointments. You can't get operations.
Is it 8 million on the waiting list now? Something ridiculous.
Something like that. So yeah, and I'm glad Farage mentioned that.
Yeah.
But what happens when we talk about the NHS is straight away the defensive mechanism is, oh, you want an American type.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
The American type is different.
Yeah.
But it's just as bad as ours just look for a lot of people who can't get it.
Yeah.
So I don't want the American type. Let's look across the channel and let's look at France and Germany.
Farage mentioned France and Germany. He mentioned apparently the model in France works very well, which is that if you have a certain level of income, you have to pay for something, but if you don't, then it was a kind of insurance thing basically. Yeah. But he said it works very well, and it's managed by the private, But also, interestingly, I think Labour has started talking about that recently, about getting the private sector more involved, which is a massive shift for Labour.
Blair started the privatisation of the NHS. He was the first one to introduce private contracts into the NHS. So Labour are not against it per se. They're just against talking about it just before an election.
Yes. Alistair Heath in The Telegraph. I'll read this out now if you don't mind. This is why I blame the Tory wets in charge for almost all the past 14 years for the Starmerite calamity that is about to befall Britain. He's good, Alistair Heath, actually. He writes some really good articles. It's the wets, so he calls them the Tory wets. I've only heard this recently about the wets, who jettisoned the free market economics, deregulation, tax cuts and supply side reforms, who crippled the city, who increased immigration, who ignored the collapse of the community and family and the baby bust, who failed to fix the civil service, who refused to scrap the BBC licence fee, who had no interest in properly reforming the public sector, including the NHS, and who promoted even more cultish reverence for a failing system, who vetoed prison building and a real crackdown on crime, who embraced net zero and the neo-Blairite quangocracy, and who wanted to surrender to the woke stormtroopers. So that's quite an interesting summary.
He's spot on.
Yeah, it's an interesting summary of everything. So he's blaming the Tory wets, basically. He's saying there's been a faction in the Tories who've allowed this stuff to happen.
Yeah, this all started under Cameron. So Cameron wasn't a Conservative, Cameron was a Blairite. And because he became party leader, then Prime Minister, it then led to more people like him joining the Tory party and standing, and they became known as the Wets. I think Margaret Thatcher coined the term Wets.
Oh, did she?
I think so. She said once, which I thought was great, she said, when I leave public office, I'm going to set a company up and it's going to be called Red to Spine. Because that was the biggest problem in Cabinet, that no one had a spine.
So this concept then that there's been a faction in the Tories,
That's why we've not left.
Like Cameron, who basically every time the true Tories, if you like, tried to put through the will of the people, stopped it from happening.
You think like Cameron, he started off before he was Prime Minister with getting a sledge and huskies across the South Pole or something to talk about the green agenda. He then came up with hug a hoodie because it's not their fault they're criminal. We need to embrace them.
Yeah.
Then he introduced gay marriage.
Yeah.
All these things are all woke progressiveness.
Yeah.
And that's how the Tory party just carried on, because it attracted more people like that into the Tory party, into positions of power. And all this wokeness has all happened under 14 years.
Yeah.
And they may complain about we don't know what a woman is, but they've let all the public organisations get into this mess. They talk about immigration's a problem, but you opened the this
Correct.
was Boris Johnson got us out of Europe, then opened the borders up to the rest of the world. It's like nobody wanted any of this.
Yeah.
So the Tories are not Conservative and haven't been for a long time, and that's why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah. And the idea that Farage has is that basically the Tories will be destroyed, and then what he wants to re-emerge from that is something that he's involved in. This is what we're hearing, but is true Tories. What we go back to the true Tories with the views and the appropriate practical views about life and everything we're doing at the moment. And they probably, I don't want to call myself a Tory here, but
it'll be interesting to see what happens to the Tory party, because they're going to get decimated, but we don't know who's going to keep their seats.
Yeah.
So if they go down to 100 seats or 200 seats, whatever, and they're still nearly all Wets, the Tory party doesn't change.
Yeah. But is that likely to happen though? Because I would imagine the Tories that are going to keep the seats will be in the more, I don't want to use the phrase right wing, in the more kind of true Tory seats like Clacton-on-Sea or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Isn't it more likely the true Tories who are going to keep? Because if you're a wet Tory and you're against a Labour candidate, your voting group is more likely to vote for Labour, aren't they?
I think you'll find most Tory MPs are Wet. There's not many Tories in there, many Conservatives in there. So I don't. But that'll be interesting to find out after the general election. What is the remaining Tory party MPs? What are they? There's going to be a civil war.
Yeah.
But if there's 150 Wets and only 40 true Conservatives, then it's obviously going to win that civil war.
Yeah.
But if it's the other way round, then they could turn into a proper Conservative party, which then negates the need for Reform UK.
Yeah.
So we don't know how that's going to be. And when people ask, mass immigration, we need to leave the ECHR, European Court of Human Rights, why don't we leave it? It's because, and from what I've read in the papers, the majority of the ministers sat in the cabinet don't want to leave.
Oh, really?
That's why Sunak and all the others couldn't get us to leave, because the vast majority of the ministers in government don't want us to leave.
Yeah. I really want to see the Tories wiped out in this election. And I'm not really concerned. Everybody, lots of people, my wife included, who's worried about Labour. I don't think Labour's going to be any different to the Tories. I genuinely
think it'll be slightly worse.
Yeah, maybe.
But they're also going to be very busy fighting each other. Because once they get into power, the Blairites and the far left will be fighting each other in the Labour Party, looking for dominance. They're going to be wanting crazy policies, but the Blairites will be going, we want to be elected again in 5 years' time. These policies will make sure we're never elected. We'll be out of power again for 10 years. There'll be a civil war. There's also no money left. Every time Labour comes into power, they inherit a good economy. There is no economy to inherit. There is no money. We're bankrupt.
Yeah.
So all their promises to keep people happy, there's no money to throw away.
Yeah, which is why they're being cautious now in what they're promising, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're going to be in trouble within 6 months and a year. They're going to be fighting themselves. There could be a coup, all sorts of things. I don't think they'll have time to fix anything, to try to fix anything. I think they'll be fighting for survival.
And interestingly, something quite chilling relating to Labour happened. So you didn't watch the question
Debate.
So the debate, I've called it question time. It's not question time debate. Penny Mordaunt was there. She had the big hairdo.
She's a wet. She's awful.
She was standing next to Angela Rayner. So those two got in a bit of a pitched battle with each other, which is quite good, really, because it kind of took the attention off Farage. But at one point, Penny Mordaunt said, this woman, she was talking about Angela Rayner, she wouldn't press the nuclear button, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Kept going on about the nuclear button, because apparently Angela Rayner voted against nuclear weapons or something. It's academic, really. But she said, this woman here who won't press the nuclear button, she could be the Prime Minister in 4 years' time. And that really scared me. The idea that Angela Rayner could be the Prime Minister of this country. She can't even string a sentence together. During that presentation, she was talking about abject poverty, and she called it abstract poverty. Yeah. She doesn't even know the correct word to use in it. So the days when we used to have intellectuals running this country, people, because my view is, I want the Prime Minister, the people who run the country, to be cleverer than me. I don't want an idiot who's somebody who's stupider than me running the country. I want clever people looking after my interests. But we've actually got a real possibility here of Angela Rayner being the Prime Minister of this country. Is that not quite shocking to you?
Not after we've just had Theresa May, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. It's just a different version of crap we've already had running the country.
Yeah, but to be fair to Liz Truss, Theresa May and Rishi Sunak, they are relatively well, and I don't want to sound classist here, but they are relatively well educated.
And that was going to be my next point. You've sort of preempted. So
Angela Rayner
is a victim of a certain amount of classism. Not misogyny, because we treat all our politicians disgracefully anyway, but because of her accent, we automatically think she's stupid. She's had a poor education, but that wasn't her fault. That was by the school she went to. So there is an inherent classism there.
Well, no, I disagree. I don't blame her for not being educated. I don't blame her. The question I'm saying is, should somebody without a good education, an intellectual, be running that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, but again, I would throw that back to you as in all our prime ministers have all had a good education. It doesn't mean they're any good.
Correct. Yeah.
So now Angela Rayner is a bit more complicated because she's easy not to like. Her accent doesn't help. She comes across and is sometimes a nasty piece of work. Could she be our Prime Minister in the future? Well, how it works in the Labour Party is she would need to be voted as party leader by the party.
But she is the deputy leader, isn't she?
Yeah. So if something happens to Starmer,
yeah,
she don't become Prime Minister. That only happens in America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
So what would happen?
So she's not like a vice president?
No. So if this will happen with any of our parties. So if the Prime Minister dies, she would take over for a month as a caretaker while they hold an election within the party about who's going to be party leader. And they then would be party leader and by de facto Prime Minister. So she's not a death away becoming that. She could win the election and then become our Prime Minister. But there's lots of people who have been Prime Minister that I saw the trigonometry interview with Liz Truss and I liked most of her policies. And I watched the interview with her and went, I can't believe you got that position.
Really?
You are shocking. Shocking that you did not know how hard the job was going to be, and she admits it. Shocking that you did not know people were going to block you. Shocking that Just
Yeah. How did she get in that position?
How did you become
Yeah.
Prime Minister
Yeah.
of this great country?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I think there's two things here. Firstly, I think we've proved that I'm a bit of a snob. Because as I'm analysing this myself, I'm actually thinking you're right, and actually just thinking about who John Prescott used to be the Deputy Prime Minister as well, didn't he? And he was probably of a similar background, education to Angela. So I'm probably a bit of a snob and a bit of a misogynist. That's my first point. I think my second observation is politics does not attract these giants anymore, does it?
No.
I think a lot of people now who've got skills, ability, whatever, just go and have a career in the private sector and make themselves a lot of money.
Yeah.
And do that.
And this is our fault.
Yes.
I've talked about this before. So people say, oh, people go into politics for money. No, they don't. Some people may go because you're still on £92,000
it's not
a year.
bad income, yeah.
And if you're, a trade unionist or you're working in Tesco's and you're a councillor and you go, well, yeah, be an MP, you're on £92,000 a year. Fantastic. But people who are planning their career, who have got options, don't pick politics because you'll earn more money being a doctor, being a barrister, working for a hedge fund, all those things. You'll earn a lot more money.
Yeah.
Now,
and have an easier life.
Well, that was the next point. So the next point then is, it's not even an attractive career anymore now, because politicians have always been hated. We can look back 200 years, look back at Roman times. We've got the writings. No one's ever trusted politicians. They always think they're in it for themselves, and they're always hated. That just goes without saying. But the amount of abuse, and some of it's down to technology now as well, the amount of abuse politicians get in this country now is horrendous. It puts the good and the great off from going into politics. So if you are a hedge fund manager and you've made your 4 billion, that's the sort of person who could do with being an MP, because they understand that sort of thing. If you're a world-class surgeon and you're beginning to retire, you'd be great as an MP. You'd bring so much stuff to the role and into Parliament, into the House of Lords. But those people then go, why would I go in that? Why would I want the abuse? I'll have protesters outside my house. I risk being killed to a certain extent. Recently, we've had 2 MPs murdered and loads assaulted and threatened every day. Why would the best of us want to be politicians? They wouldn't. So we need, as a society, as a nation, start working out how we're going to treat our politicians better. Now, we can't just treat them better, but what the answer is, we need to hold them accountable better. Because then that will put off the chances going in. It's like, I'm not going to get away with any of that. We need to look at how we recruit people for members of Parliament, because it's not a job most people want. And therefore, the talent in our country do not become our leaders.
I think that's a really good point. And interesting, we talked last week about Nigel Farage having the milkshake thrown over, and you said quite rightly, and I agree, we've got to protect our politicians. This is unacceptable. And it was almost laughed at, and it's not funny.
Yeah. Any politician from any party.
I agree.
Even parties I despise.
Yeah.
Their politicians
Correct.
we should come down hard on that one.
Yeah. What happened today was quite interesting. So there's a video, I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I've seen it.
He was Nigel Farage was on a bus, and a guy threw a couple of things at him, and Nigel Farage ducked. But what was great, what really heartened me and made me think maybe there is a chance that first of all, the construction guys grabbed the guy immediately.
Yeah, and they're bound to be Farage supporters.
And they pushed him out into the street, and they were really angry. Yeah. The guy then ran. He looked like an idiot. He ran away, and then a policeman tackled him. Yeah. A policeman, he was starting to walk away. Right. Next minute he started to run, and a copper ran and jumped him and knocked him to the ground.
I didn't see that bit.
And I thought, thank God. And then when the copper grabbed him, the crowd cheered.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, thank God. People. There are sensible people out there who understand, what's right, what's wrong, and that Nigel Farage is a person who deserves a level of respect. Yeah. So I was quite heartened to see that.
He doesn't deserve a level of respect. He deserves a level of safety.
Yes, yeah. But I just thought, because Because I thought, would people be cheering the guy? But no, they actually supported Farage, and they realised that behaviour was unacceptable, and they tackled it as well.
And the guy's lucky he didn't get a beating.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point actually. But the guys who dragged him off the site, they looked really angry. They shoved him out of the way and said, "What the hell? What the hell are you doing?" Which I thought was fabulous. Interestingly enough, on Question Time, sorry, not on Question Time,
The debate.
The debate. It was a BBC debate. And I think the interview was a female, I don't know, I think she's a Muslim lady, I can't remember her name. No. She's renowned to be a progressive.
Yeah.
But the audience were totally handpicked by the BBC. Everybody else got a round of applause when they made a statement. Farage was by far the most vocal, talented on the...
Charismatic. Entertaining.
The rest of them were like robots coming out with his little trite statements. And Farage was engaged, he listened, he talked, made sense. Didn't get a round of applause.
Yeah. How can he not get a round of applause if the audience is supposed to represent?
Correct.
Even if it's only a small applause, because there's only 15 people.
Yeah.
But to get no applause means there's no one in that room.
Yeah.
And the BBC shouldn't be picking
shocking.
audiences like that. And I believe, I saw a clip online, when the camera panned away every time Farage was talking, you could see 3 people going...
Yeah, they kept panning in on a guy with a white tee, specifically a big white T-shirt, going... Yeah. It was almost like, did they think we're idiots? Did they?
It's not that they think they're idiots. They think that's normal. They think the world and the country doesn't like Farage.
Yeah.
I told you about what Mike Sweeney said to me on his show. He said, in my office here, this floor, you'll never find a more diverse group of people here in the BBC. He's black, she's gay, and I didn't have time to talk to him. I felt like saying, yeah, they're all diverse like that, but I bet if I walked up to them and asked them what are your views on LGBTQ, every single one of them would say exactly the same thing, because they're not diverse in thought, are they? Yeah. They just look diverse.
Yeah. Are they diverse in their heads?
Yeah, and
doesn't matter what that's a really good... You should have said that to him.
Yeah.
2 articles side by side in the FT today. This week I was looking at the FT, which I thought was really interesting. Because first of all was NVIDIA. I don't know if you heard of NVIDIA.
I googled it before to find out who they were.
So NVIDIA is it's artificial intelligence chips basically.
Yeah.
It's run by a guy called Jensen Huang, who interestingly, when my son was in Dubai, he was in. Have you heard of Denny's in America? It's like you must have been when you traveled.
A good place or something.
Yeah, it was like a breakfast place. So my son was in Denny's with a friend of his. I don't know why he was in Denny's, but. This guy came in a leather jacket into Denny's, which is kind of a budget place to go. And my son, who's a big business fan, interested, he said, that's Jensen Huang. So this guy was with him, said, what, Jensen Huang, the guy who was one of the richest men in the world? I said, yeah, he is. So my son went over and said hello to him. And he said, what are you doing in Denny's? And he said, he's got a friend who used to work. I can't remember the story, but he's made a promise to this friend. He will every time he's in a city, he'll go into Denny's and buy such and such. Right. So this guy, he just so coincidentally. So anyway, NVIDIA, Jensen Huang runs, has become more valuable than Apple. So it's now worth $3 trillion. The article directly below that said that, and it blamed, unfortunately, which really irritated me, climate change and other things. Now, more than 25% of children are facing severe hunger. So the number of children facing severe hunger, and this isn't minimum, by the way, this isn't below the poverty line, this is for, so these are, has increased to more than 25%.
Pull you up on a word there?
Yes.
So you've missed it.
Go on.
Facing hunger.
Facing severe hunger, yes.
That doesn't mean they're suffering from severe hunger. That means someone's predicted if things go on the way they are, 25% of children could be facing severe. Yeah. Again, they're very clever with their words. I got that word straight away. That doesn't mean they're suffering now. That just means they predict if things go the way they may be hungry then.
Yes. Your compassion brings a tear to my
No, it's not about compassion. I don't see any child hungry, but that's one of those lines that's disingenuous.
Yes, I think you're right. I did actually read the article behind that because it was like a summary, and there was with it. I'll send it to you, but whatever. But I think there's two things here. This is the world we live in now, where you can have in a paper two articles like that juxtaposition that is tremendous. I mean, it's a tremendous thing to see. And this isn't about me being a progressive or whatever. There are starving children, but we celebrate things like Nvidia becoming worth $3 trillion.
There's no starving children in the world due to a shortage of food.
Yes.
Any starving children in the world, it's to do with war.
Yes.
It's to do with
politics,
conflict
government.
and politics.
Yeah.
We have excess food in the world.
Yeah.
We're growing more and more food on less and less land.
Yeah.
Every decade.
Yeah.
So when we have these natural disasters, it's got nothing to do with a lack of food.
Yeah.
It's to do with their leaders, civil wars and corruption.
Well,
That's no consolation to the people who are starving to death.
Yeah, I would take it further. I think there is more hunger now, but I think what's caused the hunger, and I'll go back to my favourite topic, is COVID. I think the damage we've done to the globe, globally, as a result of COVID, lockdowns and everything like that, 3 years basically, till 2 years where we stopped, the merry-go-round stopped basically. In any society, that's going to do massive damage.
Yeah.
So I think that whilst they're blaming, the FT is notoriously woke, but whilst they're blaming climate change, I think it is happening, but I don't think it's happening because...
If it was happening, it'd be on TV. We would have all the wokesters talking about, look at these brown and black people, children dying, starving, that's our fault. It's not happening, and this article really is a prediction. So they're looking at their model of climate change, and they're saying if our model's correct, 25% of children in the world will be facing hunger. Well, that's just your model. It's not happening now. If they were starving to death now, we'd all know about it. There would be fundraisers. We'd have woke Hollywood celebrities adopting half of them and being on TV. And it's not happening. We would know about it if it was happening.
Okay, let me do some research on that. What interested me was his juxtaposition and the fact that they weren't really blaming what we did to the world 2 years ago with COVID, which has had, in my view, a massive impact on world wealth, about GDP across the globe, basically. And we're just now starting to recover from that. And even now it's difficult because of working from home and things like that. European elections.
Yep. Good
result. Yeah, so I've actually been trying to analyse these. I was going to ask if you could analyse them before I came along, basically. Because as a result of the European elections, Macron has called an election.
Yep, just like Sunak. He knows he's in trouble.
Yeah.
It's only going to get worse for me.
Yeah.
I need to call one early. Get him off guard.
But in terms of the results, just the big numbers, the Renew Party, I understand the Renew Party is the French party, is that correct?
I'm not sure.
They're down 22 seats, but it's the non-aligned that have made it. So the total 720 seats. The EPP, which is, what's that lady called who runs it at the moment?
Le Pen?
No.
The one in Italy?
Yes, no, not Meloni or Le Pen. The one who runs the actual European Union.
Oh, yeah.
We just got our finger on the button here.
We have, haven't we?
Yeah. Anyway, we know
Ursula.
Yes, that's it. Yes, Ursula.
Whatever.
De Leyen. Ursula. Can we cut this bit?
Yeah, we should be talking about foreign politics.
Yeah. So Renew, which I think is the French one, has lost 22 seats. But the non-aligned, who can be more I hate to use the word right wing.
Yeah.
More to the right, and other independents have gained 37 seats. And that's why it's been such a shock, basically, because the conventional parties have either maintained or lost. The Green have lost 19 seats, which is fantastic. So this is society in Europe saying, forget net zero, we're not interested in that. Forget progressive politics. We're voting now with Le Pen and things like that. So this is the first...
And end mass migration.
They
migration. Were the 3 points that came out of that election.
So we've suddenly got the signals, haven't we?
Yeah.
They're finally here now.
Yeah.
People are seeing common sense, saying, stop this crazy lack of control of immigration. Yeah. Stop this stupid net zero thing. It's making us poor. And stop all this woke crap as well. We don't want to hear it anymore.
And we want powers being sent back to nation states.
Yes, yeah.
So they were the 3-4 points that came out of it. Very interesting. I think the people of Europe have finally woken up.
Ursula von der Leyen.
That's the lady. So they finally woken up, and there's a swing to the right. But according to the BBC, it's the far right.
Oh, that's it. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
It's
a hard right.
It's not. It's like nothing at all.
It's just shocking that. Yeah.
But we will see what happens. The Belgian Prime Minister has resigned because of the results.
Yeah.
We will see how it pans out in Europe. We're the only country in Europe that's going from a so-called conservative government to a socialist government, even though our conservative government was socialist anyway.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a step further to the left at our general election, which is the opposite of what's happening across Europe. But I think what comes after the Labour Party will be a big jump to the right.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question I was going to ask you. Why are we the only country in Europe that are moving left instead of right?
That's because we've had the Tories in power 14 years. And
I heard somebody saying the other day, we actually made that move with Boris. We moved to the right with Boris. It just never happened the way it should have done.
Well, he wasn't on the right.
No, but his policies were on the right.
Yeah.
He said he'd stop immigration. He wanted Brexit.
Yeah.
He presented himself to the right, but he didn't deliver.
Yeah, because he didn't believe in anything. It was all a lie to get elected. Yeah. But because we've had the same government for 14 years who happen to be Tories, when people are voting now who don't know that much about politics, they're going to vote the opposite of what we got. Tories have been bad, and they have. Therefore, the option now is Labour. But in other countries, they've had socialist governments, and now they're voting towards the right. And I suppose it's happening again. Let's see how Reform UK do.
Yeah. I think you're right. Reform UK could give a sign of that.
Yeah. So they might only win a couple of seats, but if they get 5-10 million votes, it's like, well,
you can't ignore that.
You can't ignore that. So let's see how they do.
Yeah. Just talking about immigration, there's something I saw. Have you heard of Constant Kissing, who's trigonometry?
Trigonometry.
So he was on Good Morning, and I don't know if this is an old clip or not.
It's about 5 years old.
About John Cleese saying that Britain is... But I just thought it was really interesting, the way he handled... And by the way, Francis, what's his face?
Foster.
He was at the Comedy Unleashed. Yeah. So John Cleese put out a tweet saying, London is less English than it used to be. And there were a bunch of race grifters on there. In fact, there wasn't a white person in the group on Good Morning saying he's a racist, this is it, he doesn't blah, 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 or whatever. But Constant Kissing said something really interesting. He said 42% of people in London were not born in England.
Yeah.
And he said, therefore, by the very nature of that, London must be less English than it was.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really good. I mean, a really good point, wasn't it?
It was, but it still wasn't allowed to be said 5 years ago.
Yes.
Anyone saying that now wouldn't get on Good Morning TV to talk about it because everyone accepts it.
Yeah.
So.
I see.
So things have changed now.
Oh, you think people accept that London is less English now?
Oh, yeah. A third of people in Manchester, at the last census in 2021, a third of people in Manchester were not born in the UK.
A third?
A third.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Not as bad as London, but getting there.
Yeah. So then by the very nature, they're not English.
They're not English.
They're not Mancunians anyway. Yeah. I just thought that was very, very interesting.
He handled it really well. He
did. He's quite impressive. He's getting quite big now.
Oh, he is, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a lot bigger than Francis Foster.
Yeah.
And the final one, a kind of a light thing here, which I just find staggering. The Met Office have just said that the May we just all experienced, and we're all sitting here with our heating on and our jumpers, they've said that the UK had the warmest May since records began.
Yeah, bollocks. Sometimes you know something's bollocks, don't you?
We'll head up this section with Nick says bollocks. I was interested in your reaction. I didn't realise it'd be so.
Yeah. Now what we need to do...
It is absolute bollocks. It's been freezing in May. It's been cold. Central heating's been on. It's been one of the worst Mays I've experienced in my life.
So what we need to do with that statement is we need to look at the information they're basing that on. and we need to look at how that information was collected, how those stats collected, what changes have you done to the metrics of how you collected the temperature throughout May, because they're changing the formulas all the time.
Yeah.
So you're not comparing like for like, you're comparing this year's May based on this formula and these areas, and the thermometers were up a tree, or they were next to a road, or they were on wherever they were placed. It's not the same where they were based a couple of years ago. So you get fluctuations in the temperature by measuring different places at different times of the day. And so all this is just pure rubbish.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? There's a guy called Chris Morrison who writes for the Daily Skeptic who talks about this stuff. And there's data called the Hadkrut data, which is held by the Central Meteorological Society or whatever. And apparently they're manipulating this data to change the historical data to make today's data look worse than it is. And there's email exchanges that have been found through Freedom of Information requests where they're actually saying we could do with this historical data looking a bit worse than it is. And they've actually so somebody somewhere is tracking the historical data as it's presented by these meteorological organisations. And they're actually showing that they've changed historical data to make today's data look worse than it is. So, I mean, that is really unbelievable. You know, you talk about following the science. These scientists are not following the science. They're as you say, they're manipulating numbers. But they must take the general public for absolute fools if they think they're going to believe that May has been the warmest on record.
They don't care if we believe it or not. What they care about is them producing these reports leads to more funding for them.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you're giving us the right answers.
Yeah.
We're going to fund more reports off you.
Yeah.
So when scientists became businesses and are selling something to people, that is bound to affect what you produce.
Correct.
And that's what's happened to climate science. Is you get no funding to run anything if you're looking to prove climate change doesn't exist. You won't get funding for that. But you will if you're saying we're looking at how termites in America affects the El Nino effect in Brazil.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll fund that. So it's science. We're always proving science is wrong.
Yeah.
So all the best scientists who exist today, all of them will be proven wrong in the future.
Yeah. So, because they use the expression for climate change, settled science.
Yeah,
there is no such thing as settled science
exactly.
in any discipline because things are always changing, things are always improving. I think the scary thing about this, Nick, for me is these statements, for whatever reason they're manipulating that data, it leads to real world consequences because the governments, politicians see this, and politicians, as we know, are not the brightest. They see this, they believe it, and then they start to implement things like net zero, no petrol cars in 2035. All these things make real world impacts on us, the general public, and cost us money.
The people, the companies, the multinationals who make money on those stuff are funding the reports.
Yeah.
Of course, I make electric cars. Of course, I believe in net zero. If I can get some of the reports into Parliament about how we're all going to die, well, policies will aim to my business and I'll make more money selling electric cars. I used to think the net zero agenda and climate change idiocy was all left-wing silliness. And a couple of years ago, I realised that's part of it. You know, woke people will believe anything, so save the world. But then there's also the multinationals who are making a fortune on this. They're getting the government grants to build, wind farms and
batteries,
and they don't care if it makes money or not because they're paid up front. They make their profit in the government grants, and if none of it works, well, we've made our money. And those multinationals are making a fortune and are funding a lot of the research so they get access to the government grants.
I think you're right.
It's a big scam.
It is, but I just I think people are starting to realise, aren't they? We've seen the European elections. They've moved against the Green Party. They know that's a nonsense as well. But people are having enough, getting enough now because it's hitting people in their pockets, isn't it? I think that's the reality of it.
A lot of these ideas were fine, made us feel pink and fluffy when there was plenty of money. Not plenty of money anymore now. So now we're looking at, do we want to spend money on pink and fluffy, or do we want to spend it on what we need?
Yeah.
And people are beginning to say, spend it on what we need.
So with that, spending on what we need, if you want to have an MP who's going to represent you in Parliament and make sure money's spent on you for the right reasons and deal with these issues, please vote for Nick Buckley MBE on the 3rd, is it 3rd? 4th of July, Independence Day, Oldham East and Saddleworth.
Yeah.
The best of luck, Nick.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Did you like that video? I think you did. Hit the bell, give it a big thumbs up, comment, and don't forget I'm standing for election in Oldham East and Saddleworth. So please share this video, speak to your family and friends if you live in Greater Manchester, and if you live in Oldham East and Saddleworth, make sure you vote for me. Catch you soon.